hello everyone. I would like to welcome you to this webinar, and we are really grateful you made time for it. Now I will hand it over to Martin, our senior associate at Sparring, who will tell you more. So enjoy.
Hey everybody, it's a pleasure to be here and speak to you. As a quick reminder, this is a Cardano Contract Suite Q&A. It's an open Q&A to the Contract Suite by Sparring that we prepared for Cardano founders, builders, developers. I'll start with a quick intro about the contract suite, myself, and the session, and then we'll move into opening up the Slido. I'll share the QR code and link in a moment, and you'll all be able to post questions into Slido, ask about anything that relates to the contract suite or just more generally legal matters relating to Cardano, and then we will move to answering your questions. So, uh, the contract suite for Cardano was prepared by Sparring. Sparring is a law firm focusing on innovators and builders, whether they are building in Web3 or Web2. So we're mostly focusing on startups wherever they are building. As a result, we prepared the contract suite that is specifically tailored for founders who are building on a Cardano and are building within the decentralized ecosystems that often arise within Cardano. And so all of the contracts are specifically adjusted to the needs of the specific ecosystem and the environment, which differs from the standard Web2 software development process that we also work with. The specific here is that unlike just providing templates, we also provided our guidelines documents, which document a lot of the internal legal thinking that we had behind creating and adjusting the documents. And therefore, you can get a lot of the advice that you'd normally get from a lawyer on how to negotiate the documents, how to approach different clauses, what the rationales behind them are in written form. And since the project was backed by Project Catalyst, Fund 13, all of this is community funded, free to use, and all of the commentary and the legal thinking behind the templates are open to everybody to be used. We can move to opening up the Slido questions for you. So feel free to use the QR code or the Slido code on the screen and submit any questions that you might have, whether these relate directly to the templates and contracts or just negotiating specific clauses, dealing with contracting issues within the Cardano ecosystem, or generally working with lawyers or anything sort of legal related within the Web3 and Cardano ecosystem. Generally, of course, it takes a minute for us to get some of the first questions. Like, legal isn't something where we know people are the fastest to get to ask your questions, to think about what they might need. So I have a few 2 or 3 slides prepared to just walk through some of the basics, remind you of the what the suite contains, maybe how to use it a little, and then we'll get to the questions that we get in the meantime. So essentially, what the contract suite is, how exactly it works. We have 4 documents here that we prepared along with their guidelines versions and a general contracting guide that sort of documents the entire suite, its reason for existence, and some general tips for using it. The first document that we have is the mutual NDA. This is the very standard pre-contracting document for non-disclosure that you sign to ensure confidentiality before you get into negotiations with someone, before you start discussing the details of a deal, maybe what you want to build together, or what kind of services you'll be providing to them, how you'll engage with them, what the commercial details of this are. So this is the first part. It was specifically adapted to work better in the Web3 environment. We'll get to that in a minute, or maybe in your questions. Second, for when the actual engagement starts, if you're a builder building something for one of your customers or providing your product on a SaaS basis, we have the Master Services Agreement that documents both sort of custom software creation and service provision to your customers. So this is very flexible, works on the basis of service orders, which can document different projects that you're working on for the same client. Then once the work is completed, once the software is live, we have the service level agreement that documents the maintenance of the software, the uptimes, the specific processing times that you might have, the service response times, and any actual in-person support that might be needed from your support teams when you're building something. This is very useful, and we're providing sort of very specific guidelines on how to set this up for your clients, specifically considering different nuances of Web3 compared to more sort of standard traditional software development and support. And then finally, we have a contract for individual builders. So if you, as a company, need to engage a contractor, or if you are an individual builder contractor who's working with a client, then this this document helps you do that compliantly and specifically in a way that supports working within the decentralized ecosystem, supports using stablecoins for payment, and different optimizations for Cardano. So these are the four documents that are available for you along with their guidelines versions. And I have a few tips and tricks here from our experience working with founders that you can use, and then we'll get to the questions. Firstly, what we did with the NDA and what's often missing when founders are signing simple NDAs that weren't adapted for Web3 use is the retention of confidential information that remains on chain or the ledger that can't be technically erased. So this is something that's not contemplated by many NDAs, and if you're signing a standard NDA, there's a chance that you might be in breach from day one because it is impossible to remove the other party's information that you stored on the ledger. Here we're using an obfuscation clause, which essentially says if you're storing something on chain in an encrypted manner, you have to destroy any keys. You have to ensure that this can't be decrypted, even if the on-chain information can't be erased later on. So this is the one of the sort of main features of the Cardano specific NTA. Then we have the MSA with IP transfers. In the Master Services Agreement, what we see as one of the classic failure points and especially in Web3 software development, is the difficulty of chasing your payments and non-paying customers. Since you're usually working remotely, globally, often with pseudonymous or anonymous teams, it might be very difficult to chase your payments, and therefore we are tying the transfer of intellectual property to the payment. And therefore, essentially, we're building a handbrake for you where if the customer isn't paying, you can prevent them from using the intellectual property that you developed or provided for them, which is very, very useful for when you want to enforce your claim. Then for the MSA, we're also this is especially useful within Cardano, where there's a lot of shared and open source tools that you're working with. And essentially what we're doing here is that anything within the MSA that is reusable, that is specifically built for the community or used within the community remains with you or with the original owner, and you're only moving licensing exclusively to your client, whatever is specifically created for them. And this is very useful for building in the often open sourced or partly open sourced environments of Cardano. On the SLA, what we see like one of the most significant exposures that we saw with some of our Web3 clients is that uh, their SLAs expose them to quite significant liability. If there's a downtime, if there's a sort of an exposure from a third-party chain that you're working with, for example, if you're bridging transactions, this is something that can really cause a lot of exposure for you. We're minimizing this and using service credits to ensure that the exposure of your project is minimized. And then finally, in the contractor agreement, we have the right of substitution that we selected. So essentially, if you're working as a solo contractor, or if you as a company are engaging someone, we are still retaining the right of substitution of a replacement to work for you to maintain the regulatory, to reduce the regulatory exposure of unlawful work. Apologies, just a second. Okay, with this, we can move to some of the questions. Let me change what I'm sharing, and we already have some questions here. Brilliant. So for the MSA, we have a question of whether the MSA can work for apologies, for a single project with a fixed price. Yes, the MSA is tailored to work in both environments, either in a situation where you have a client for whom you're delivering multiple projects or pieces of work, or in an environment where you're just signing a single service order, or not even assigning a service order, just have a scope of work. And this describes the one project that you have. The second question that we have. Document says IP only transfers after full payment, but the customer can already see the code and run it on the testnet. What leverage do I have? Oh, brilliant. This is a good question. It ties directly to the point that I was describing a moment ago. If you own the intellectual property that you created for the customer, even if they already have access to it or some form of control over it, if you own it, you can prevent them from using it. And that means if you still own the database from which it was shared, then you can just remove access for the client, and you have the full right to do that because you're the owner if they don't pay provided. Or alternatively, you have a legal claim here. And of course, going the legal route can be a bit difficult, and forcing your IP ownership against someone who is often pseudonymous might be difficult. But therefore, going with the access control, where you can control the access to the file and the code is yours, so you can turn off that access, is the most useful method that we can see. So then we have the next question. I'm a contractor, not a customer. If customer hands me their version of the MSA, which is way harsher than yours, can I just send them yours? Yes. And this is a classic question of sort of negotiating power and what position you're in. So it's sort of difficult to give like full guidance here on how to approach. It really depends on how much you need them and how much they need you. But what we created is a very very good baseline with very market standard terms. So you can, if they hand you something else, you can compare what they give you against what we created, and you can one evaluate whether what they gave you is market standard, it's normal, or it's very harsh for you. And of course, if you have what they handed you, you can compare that against ours and use that as negotiation leverage. Essentially say, we have these very standard templates, we have this thing that's very common within Cardano, it's been published, it says this and that, this is the level of harshness, let's use that instead of what you propose because we have the market standard for this. So it actually gives you decent leverage. Then we have a question about contracts work. Oh, if you don't sit in the UK, whether the contract still applies. That's, again, very good question. Yes. So we base the entire contract suite around English law, because that is the international standard for contracting. It is simple, it is recognized, but you don't have to sit in the UK or have anything to do with the UK for the contract suite to work. So you can adapt it to wherever in the world you are. Generally, it is very likely that you and your clients, customers, providers will be sitting in different jurisdictions. You're sitting in the UAE, for instance, and they're at least, on the corporate level based somewhere in the Caribbean, for instance. In that case, it is very common for the two parties to agree to the UK as their jurisdiction that is neutral and recognizable. So yes, this is exactly for those purposes. Mm. And then we have a question from James. Oh, it's great to have people with names because generally in these legal sessions, everybody asks anonymous. So this is actually a nice change. So hi, James. Can the NDA stop someone from building something similar? Good question. I would say be careful here. NDAs are very useful when you're sharing your concepts, pricing, ideas with someone. The NDA prevents them from using exactly what you gave them and just using your information and your property to do something else. Of course, saying that, it's good to pair this with other forms of protection. So even if you sign an NDA, don't share all of your secrets with the third party. because the NDA isn't self-enforcing. You still have to go to court. However, it is not a non-compete. So even if you share your confidential information with them, they sign an NDA, they can still build something similar to what you are building if they say, I haven't used any of your confidential information. I created this myself, and I'm only using public information. In that case, the NDA doesn't protect you. So that's an important note on NDAs. So, and a question from Laura. Hey Laura, how detailed does a service auto need to be? Like, is build staking dashboard enough, or do I need to write out every endpoint and screen? Oh, great question. And we actually get this, interestingly, more in sort of Web 2.0 environment than in Web 3 environment. But the answer here is it depends on your pricing setup. If you are charging your customer by the hour, then a service order that says build staking dashboard is enough. Because if you if you're charging by the hour and you have a good understanding, you have regular calls, for example, like we call this agile development. Like if you're working on an agile manner, then it's completely okay to have a very vague service order. But if you if you want to go with a fixed scope, and this is what we see in Web 3 much more often than in Web 2, where almost everybody is building on a fixed scope, which means I'll tell you I'll build the solution for you, for example, your staking dashboard, and you'll pay me an X amount, a fixed sum. And if you're going for this fixed scope, fixed price solution, then it is very useful to be quite a lot more detailed. Like what we often suggest to clients is not just writing down the service order that contains what should be built, but also attaching some sort of sales slides or the deck that was used to describe what's going to be built or some technical information. Apologies. This is to ensure that both you and the customer are on the same page in terms of what you are expecting to be built and to be created. Good. I think that this is the last question that we have now, but we can wait a moment to see if we get anything else. Hmm. I think this, so I'll give this a few more minutes. In the meantime, just a reminder, I'll go back to my slides for a moment. You can see the Cardano Contract Suite, which you can find at catalyst.sparring.io. Here on this website, you can download all four of the templates, their guidelines versions, and then the general document that describes, everything useful that there might be about using the documents, how to use them, how to modify them, how to work with them, why they were created. And this is all available for you to be used whenever you need to, whatever you need to touch legal within Cardano. Hmm. Seems to be all of the questions for now. Just clicking through to the Cardano website that we build, you'll find the link to this in the event description, and we generally share it around Cardano socials and communities. But feel free to, if you can't find this or if you have anything else that you want to discuss, feel free to reach out to us at sparring.io, and we can point you in the right way. Yes, I think these are all of the questions that we have for now. Mishka, unless you have anything else that you either want to share, or if we have anything else, just do let me know. If not, I think we can we can cut it for today, and we'll have our second Q&A session for any questions that you might think of additionally. Oh, thank you, Mark.
Okay, I think yes, that's it. Thank you so much, guys, for coming here. Yes, as Mathieu said, there will be part two. You can find it also on our socials, and also we will share this webinar with you on our YouTube. So check definitely our social media like LinkedIn or X or previously Twitter. Thank you so much.